Welcome back to episode 33 of the Weekly Blues podcast. This week we have a really special guest, John England. He is a singer-songwriter currently residing in Nashville, Tennessee. John England and the Western Swingers have played in Nashville for over 20 years. They've also performed at various venues from Nashville to New York, and even the Grand Ole Opry. So welcome to the show, John.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a guest that my parents kind of facilitated for us. I've met John in Nashville a couple times. My dad has kind of grown a nice friendship with John, exchanging Wisconsin cheese for some CDs and things like that. So I'm happy to have you on and start to talk about your career in music and what it means to you and Nashville as a whole. So pretty excited for this one.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Yeah, so just starting off right away, you probably get asked this a lot as, a musician, but what does music mean to you? Ben and I we talk about it pretty much every episode. We talk about what music we're listening to, what it's sort of gotten us through and all that sort of stuff. So if you could just give, a few words about what it really means to you, especially as it being, as you are as prominent as music can be in your industry. That wasn't English.
Yeah. Well, I fell in love with music at an early age, and I just kept making one mistake after another, and here I am. I started playing gigs, professionally when I was right after my freshman year of college at Indiana University. And I thought, wow, this is just, I'd always kind of fantasized, I guess, about being a musician and a person who could do it for a living. And that's kind of the track I got into. I didn't spend too much time trying to be a recording star, really, pursuing those goals. But I'm what I think of as a working musician who tries to keep the date book full.
Sure. That's a really good way of looking at it too. I think, just taking everything as it comes and staying in the present, not looking too far ahead and just kind of enjoying making music and playing for people. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about like how the band was formed. Cause you mentioned like you started doing professionally, like after your first year of college, but like, was there like a moment that it really took off and you kind of like came together with like similar minded people that wanted to kind of get this going?
Well, sort of. The Western Swingers. So I grew up in Southern Indiana. Okay. I played, music I started playing the fiddle in elementary school and through middle school and high school. Started playing the guitar when I was 14. And then the electric bass came along with that, and playing in the school groups, mostly on electric bass, really. But, and then I went to Indiana University to study music, ended up getting an arts and sciences degree. This is the long way around.
Yeah.
When I started playing professional gigs, then I got involved with a rhythm and blues band around in Indiana. It was really turned into a happening thing. We were, a successful bar band, I guess,
sure,
for such young people. And then I quit that band, stayed in Bloomington one more year, and then I went to New York City for 9 years, where I started singing more. I realized that starting cold kind of in New York, I'd work more if I could sing some. And I started doing that. 9 years later, my wife and I came to Nashville with our little daughter. And a few years later, I thought, boy, I'm working gigs, but I wasn't playing country music. I thought, if we moved to Nashville, I always thought I'd be playing more country music. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, playing down at these places on Broadway would be a good place to like meet other pickers and singers, kind of break into that circle of people. And I went down there, and all these fantastic country pickers were going, the chicken picking and the hot bluegrassy stuff. And I thought, oh my gosh, because really, I mean, in New York, the talent level, especially when I left, was really high. but I came to Nashville and I heard these guitar players and I said, what the heck did I get myself into? You know what I mean? Really?
Yeah.
For rock and roll, for blues, for country, there's so many great pickers here. Mm-hmm. Now, I think maybe in New York, there's more jazz, great jazz players. There's more people who are good at ethnic music, maybe different ethnic music. But just for those three basics of rock and blues and country, I mean, Nashville, my gosh, and the singers, you know, there's just a lot of musical talent here. And, but I said, oh, wait. And I was really listening to a lot of Western swing right at that point and digging it so much. I thought, well, I could play that kind of jazzy stuff. And some of these country guys, they don't really do that as much. Mm-hmm. And like a lot of career plans, it came about a little bit through ignorance. Turned out later, I found out a lot of those country pickers could really play some Western swing too. But I didn't know any better than just, you know, you latch on to something that gives you confidence, even if it may not be right, you know, sometimes, right? And thank God for our ignorance. It allows us to do some things sometimes. Yeah. So anyway, and I started this little band, and after like the second week, the fiddler said, hey, John, next week I won't be here. And I thought of a guy that I had met the first year I was in town. I subbed some shows at this Opryland theme park. It was the last year Opryland was open. Used to give a lot of work to musicians here in Nashville. And I had met this fiddler who I thought was just the greatest. His name was Gene Merritts. Everybody called him Pappy. Mm-hmm. And I called Pappy. I mean, I had to work up my courage to call him. And I mean, and this is ridiculous. You know, I was 35 years old then or whatever, right? You know, been a professional musician for 20 years almost, right? Mm-hmm. And he said he would come sub. And afterward, he said, hey, you know, you'd be a good sub for this guy, Joe Manuel, in our Western swing band. Mm-hmm. And Joe Manuel, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a great picker, originally from Louisiana. His dad had played with Bob Wills back in the day, who was the king of Western swing music. Okay. Joe Manuel's a great guitar player and singer and a really fun guy with that Cajun vibe. His brother, Abe, was playing with Merle Haggard, I don't know, for 20 years. Joe played with Merle. He was playing with George Strait up until the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. He's just a really cool. I used to go hear that band and think, wow, Joe Manuel. Yeah. And then here's Pappy saying, you might be a good sub for Joe Manuel. I thought, you know. So that's how we started. And he said, and we ought to play at Roberts, you know, to play where the old band, their band with Joe Manuel had played. So we started doing that July of 2001. And I was just thinking, really, boy, this is a lot of talking. But I was just thinking that this would be a way to get into that country circle. Mm-hmm. Then it turned out we made this album. And we said, we'll just make an album to sell to the people who come into Roberts. And well, then these people out in Texas liked it, and they started inviting us out to do some of their festivals and stuff. And then it suddenly became like the thing I did instead of just this little thing I was doing to get somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, you're totally fine. I wanted to highlight one thing you said, though, the idea of ignorance and you're kind of naive to something. I've noticed that too, where like I get really passionate about a topic I'm researching, or you think you're discovering something new and you're just like ignorant to the fact that other people have done the work too. But that you're right. Like it fuels that passion and it makes you like keep going into that. And I think you can kind of hear some of that in your story too, where it's like you wanted to get into the country scene and you thought like, hey, I could really, you know, vibe with this. And then next thing you know, you realize other people are doing it too, but like it's still something you're passionate about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, Western swing music is so fun to play and sing. Mm-hmm. And it's like it's jazz for country musicians. And I remember in our first few years, we had some subs who were really high profile country players. They would come down to play and you could see in their eye, they felt like they were getting away with something. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Because really, if you're playing for a country singer as a sideman, it's often a kind of a square job. Mm-hmm. In other words, you play just what somebody already played on the record, or you work out something kind of safe and you play that same way every time. And Western swing, you know, Bob Wills said, when I point that fiddle bow at you, that's the way he directed his band. He would point the fiddle bow at one of his players. He says, I want you to knock my hat off. That was really blow him away. Play something crazy. And so that's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about people in your band and people that you've met, obviously well-known musicians, especially in the Nashville area, as well as the idea that Nashville is home to numerous rising stars and country legends alike, right? Your personal opinion, who's been your favorite player there or person that you've ever met down in Nashville or wherever that you've been able to play with or learn from or anything like that?
Wow, that would be hard. But some of the people that I have really been grateful to have been associated with, beyond people who are regular members of our band, who I've learned a lot from, of course. But the first few years of our band, we had a steel guitarist who played with us maybe 10 or 12 times named John Huey. And John Huey was from Arkansas. He grew up, he was best friends with a guy who changed his name to Conway Twitty. And John Huey played in his band for many years, 25 years maybe. Then went with Vince Gill. He's on many great records. And was such a gracious and kind person to me. And I so appreciate that. Not to mention get to be there standing next to him while he's playing so beautifully. Buddy Spiker is a legendary fiddler here who's still alive. John passed away of cancer maybe 10 years ago already. But Buddy Spiker is a legendary fiddler here. And I was very grateful for my contact with him when he would play with our band or me just hanging out with him a little bit, him telling me stories of the old days.
Yeah, that it's amazing. You don't think certain like interactions with people or it's just like all about how you treat others, right? I mean, you never know who you're going to meet that's going to be, you'll impact or the opposite. And I think it's really key to maintain that kindness. And like you said, you meet a lot of good people. And I think, maintaining that in all your interactions is really helpful. But I want to transition a little bit into Roberts as a whole, because Austin hasn't been there, and knowing Austin's like music taste, that's the place I think he would like to go most. It's really one of those places that plays, the classic tunes. And you being there since, looking from your website, you've played there every Monday since 2001. Like that's a long time to be at a single venue. And is there anything you like, what can you say about Roberts and how it's kind of changed over the years?
Yeah, well, I wish I had gotten in there when I first came to town, because I'd been hearing about it when I still lived in New York. Friends would go to Nashville and say, man, there's this place, Roberts Westerworld. They've got this band BR 549. And just like anything, when you start relationships, when something is at the beginning, like Roberts, I don't think's really had live music until 95 or 96. And I moved there January 97. So, really to have been there at the ground floor, you develop those relationships with people that really are deep,
Yeah.
But now I'm looked at as one of the old timers. That's kind of cool. But what I noticed is in the early days, there were fewer people going to Broadway. There were fewer people coming into Roberts. But I would say a higher percentage of them were coming there because they loved country music. About 2005 or something like that, we started to get hot. Nashville got hot. And we got this reputation and the bachelorette parties.
Yeah.
People would come here because they heard it was a good place to party. And that's been a blessing and has brought some changes too that aren't awesome. I think there's a lower percentage of people now who come in the door who are real music fans. And more people who are there because their company is having a convention or they're there to party with their buddies or friends, pals. Still all good. You know what I mean? I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. And that playing on place almost 20 years speaks. I mean, I've tried to do a good job and be really conscientious and responsible, but it says a lot about the management of that place.
Mm-hmm.
Where in Nashville, there's so many pickers and singers, and I don't know of anybody at the other joints who's been working there 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, they change their musicians like they change their socks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned bachelorette parties. It's a couple times when my dad and I have gone, because I think we've gone there 3 times. And even like progressively, it's just more and more about, you know, I think Nashville kind of loses, like you said, like people don't come there necessarily only for the music. It's more of this like party scene. And you're walking down Broadway at, you know, midnight, and you see 5 bachelorette parties, depending on, you know, what time of the week you go. But, you know, with Roberts, it's a little more centered about the music, I feel. And I think, like you said, that's what kind of makes it even more special. And the fact that management has been able to, you know, maintain that sort of, you know, vibe with the place has been really interesting and important, I think.
Knock on wood, they can keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah. The owner of Roberts is a musician and a singer. And
Okay.
he wants to treat traditional country music. He wants to present traditional country music and treat it with respect.
Mm-hmm.
There's no TVs. The girls who work there don't have to wear tank tops, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and shorts or anything. So, yeah, it's really been fortunate. When I was a kid, my sister, I had 3 older sisters, and one of them went to Indiana University before I did. And she got into photography. And she took a beautiful black and white picture of a blues act named Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. I don't know if you know of them, but they were kind of country blues, just 2 of them, harmonica and then guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And they were playing at this place in Bloomington called the Bluebird. And this beautiful black and white picture my sister took of them, it just enhanced all my romantic notions of rootsy music and what's cool
Mm-hmm.
in popular music, you know. And I kept that picture in my guitar case for 5 years, right, when I was learning to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I got to play at the Bluebird with this band.
Oh.
I met my wife there, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
But Roberts has a little bit of that vibe where they're trying to, you know, not make it just super commercial, but the cool stuff with a little more
Mm-hmm.
personality and a little more what I call integrity.
Yeah.
Or think of as integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen so many people come in there, you know, stay for a song or 2 and then leave because it's not their cup of tea. But you know, my parents sat in there all day when they went there, like for their anniversary. I think one year they sat there all day, and they're like, because I was watching the farm, and I was like, oh, like what are you guys doing today? Oh, we sat at Roberts. I was like, okay, what else? And they're like, no, that's it. And they're perfectly content with you know, sitting there and having their fried bologna sandwich and you know, but it's awesome when you go. I recommend that, and then stop over to Jack's next door and get some barbecue.
Okay. Yeah. I have this really big ambition of my goals. Like I want to be able to travel to as many places as possible. And ever since I've become more interested in, you know, kind of the more traditional country music, which has been sort of as of recently, Nashville's always been a place that, you know, I want to journey there at least some point, if not, you know, stay there for a little bit or whatnot. But this brings up a point that I wanted to ask you, because you've played at cities all across the country, and obviously you've stuck around in Nashville for a lot longer because you just enjoy it. But do you feel that there's another city or, you know, town in the United States that has like a sort of a staple genre of music that it's known for, that kind of gets as much, you know, national recognition as, you know, Nashville does for country?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah. You know, if you study the history of American popular music, right, you start in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got Memphis and Chicago. Uh, and New York has a certain flavor that it's, for modern jazz, particularly, I think of, and then punk rock later. I'm probably the only person that who's had a steady gig at Roberts who also played at CBGB's. You know what CBGB's was?
No.
It's been closed now for 10 or 15 years, but it was the American birthplace for punk rock. That's where
wow, okay,
the Ramones played, and Television, and the Talking Heads, right, got well known there. Most of the American punk rock bands started at CBGB's in the first wave, anyway.
Okay.
So anyway, I dig and I respect a lot of different kinds of music. When I remember the first time my wife and I went to New Orleans, and we were like, we went down to the French Quarter, and it was awesome. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. And about 10 years later, I had a gig there, and I went to the French Quarter, and it was awful. It had become this very touristy commercial deal where they weren't playing New Orleans music. We walked by and the guy's playing Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison, and their band is playing Mustang Sally. The songs are great songs, they're great records, but that's not what you go to New Orleans for.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I had the same experience in Memphis. The first time we went to Beale Street, I was like, we heard this little organ trio with a woman singer, and it was just what you wanted to hear in Memphis. And I heard these blues bands that sounded like Memphis blues bands. And I went back 10 years later, and it was like the whole place smelled like beer, the street and the alley. And the band is playing like Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it's good, but it's not what you go to Memphis for,
For sure.
And some of that's happened on Lower Broadway for sure. Most of the places you go, and I hate these places. They've got the windows open and they have speakers that are pointed out the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's like walking the Midway at a carnival sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
And really, if I wanted to go hear the music, I can tell what they're playing, even when the door is closed. You don't have to broadcast it 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear them, they're playing songs by classic rock bands and rap songs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, to me, what makes Nashville different. I like to go and get the flavor of a place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you expect when you go to a place versus and even like in your experience and going back to places, you really do expect, Nashville to be this or Memphis to be that. And when it's not that, you're right. You want to make sure that you are getting the best experience out of a place and learning its culture. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes it kind of, meshes together, but yeah.
But then on the other hand, culture is not something that's, kept in a formaldehyde bottle, like
that's true.
Dead insect. It's changing all the time.
Yep.
And who am I to say that African Americans on the south side of Chicago have to sound like Muddy Waters?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, that
exactly.
was 70 years ago. He had his heyday. Doesn't really, so it's a balancing act, and everybody gets to pick their own perspective on it.
For sure. Yeah,
no, I'm happy you talked. Sorry, I'm just happy you talked about that kind of the flavor of the place that you're going to, like that staple, I don't want to say tradition, but like you go there and you expect a sort of atmosphere, right? Like I just actually recently traveled to Chicago, and like the first thing on my mind was a Chicago style hot dog. Like I don't know why, but that's like something you go there to expect. And I'm like sure the same, follows suit with music, right? I haven't had the pleasure of being able to travel to sort of the major music cities in our country, but like you sort of go to regions across the nation and you have that sort of expectation, like, hey, this is what I'm coming here to understand something that's different than my own taste and my own, the things that I like. And it feels good to know that that's being honored and being respected. But you said it perfectly, John. It's okay to have things change because the stuff had made their heyday in 80 years ago. Well, you can't expect that to be the same vibe throughout time. Like things are destined to change whether people want it or not. You just kind of have to get used to it and sort of adapt yourself to that change, really, instead of try to make that change adapt to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't want to go to Rome to eat McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to do pretty much anything that I can to get like the whole 360 experience. And so,
but they don't have to be locked in a time capsule either.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, perfectly said.
So Austin mentioned you kind of played all over the country, right? You start out in Indiana and you go to New York City and now Nashville. And I wanted to talk about your experience at the Grand Ole Opry, because for so many musicians, like that's the pinnacle, right? Like, like you made it when you did that. Like, take us back to that experience and, what was it like? And were you nervous or anything like that?
I was glad to be there. I don't remember if I was nervous or not. The funny story I have about that is when I was a little boy, my dad brought us down. I think we were going to see Lookout Mountain. Maybe we went all the way to Florida. I don't know. But we stopped on a Saturday night in Nashville. And my dad said, well, let's go see the Grand Ole Opry. And as usual, he had made no plans in advance. He didn't call for tickets or anything. But we went down there to the Ryman, on which the front entrance in those days was on the Fifth Avenue side. And I remember there was a line down the block, and we all said, "Oh, Dad, we'll never get in." Forget it. He says, "Well, I don't know." And he went and talked to the lady at the window, and she said, "Oh, sure, I can get you in." So yeah, in country music, especially if you're into the old stuff like I am, the Opry is a big part of the story, and to feel like you're part of that story is very exciting. About the fall of 2002, I got the gig playing with Loretta Lynn on the road with her band of coal miners. Mm-hmm. And the first weekend on the bus, the guy goes, he says, 3 weeks from now, you're going to love it. We're playing the Opry. I said, wow, fantastic. I always wanted to play the Opry. And he goes, that's not it. He says, it's George Jones' birthday, and Patty Loveless and Vince and everybody's going to be there. It's going to, Dolly Parton, everybody's going to. I said, yeah. I called my folks. My mom was so excited. My mom was excited too about the Loretta Lynn gig, because even though I'd been a professional for, 15 or 20 years already, it was the first person I was playing with that she'd actually heard of, so it was really a big deal for her. Mm-hmm. But of course, Loretta, the Saturday morning of that show, the manager called, Loretta's not feeling well. We're not going to do it. And I think she scheduled 4 or 5 more Opry dates with her in the time I played with her for a year and a half. And she canceled every one of them. So I thought, but 6 months after that, I got a call. Hey, how about the Western Swingers? You guys want to play the show? I says, yes, we do. So, yeah, that was cool. It's been a while. The Opry's changed some, mm-hmm. and but I still love to hear it. I enjoy mm-hmm. it every time I hear it, and we're doing fine without it. It doesn't, just between you and me, it doesn't pay what you think it would pay. It's got a little more prestige than actual pay.
Yeah.
But, Buddy Spiker told me when he first started coming to town to play the Opry in the late 50s, and he was playing with, I forget, some West Virginia people. He's from West Virginia originally. And he said it paid about $5 or something. And there was a boarding house that all the out-of-town musicians tried to stay in East Nashville, run by this woman. And you could stay there for $3. And if you had breakfast, that'd be $1 more. So they had it like he could leave town and he could have 50 cents extra or something like that.
But you could say you played at the Opry, so
Right. It's That's high funny. Cotton for hillbillies.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to switch kind of topics here a little bit. We'll still stick to the musician and music stuff, but since it's your industry, like music is your industry and it's kind of what your life revolves around, when you're not doing that, as hard as it is to, not be involved with that, what do you find yourself doing? Like, what do you do in your free time? Sort of what interests you that can relate to music or isn't necessarily related to music?
Well, okay, yeah. One of the things that I've become more and more involved in and more aware of is my spiritual life. I was lucky to be raised in a good family, and a loving church as a kid. Drifted away from church like a lot of college-age people do. But then started coming back when we had a kid, of course. That's an old story. Mm-hmm. And when we moved to Nashville, I said to my wife, I go, look, now, down there, a church is a big part of life. We got to get into it. And we were lucky to have found a great church home with a great church family. And we're Methodists, so we try to be fairly diligent about it, Mm-hmm. And something that has struck me more and more over the years is how much my musical life is connected to my spiritual life. At least when I'm got my head on straight. Mm-hmm. It really, as much as I love music as an absolute thing, I look at it more and more now as an avenue to connect with people.
Sure.
And I'm not a big proselytizer or evangelist, but I want to share grace and love through the music. And I think that's the way most people feel music, honestly. Yeah, I'm part of a group here called Music for Seniors, which provides live music for, long-term care facilities or seniors in other venues. And that has helped become more and more apparent. It's just so obvious. If I'm just there, just me and my guitar, usually not even a microphone or anything, I'm looking at those people, they're looking at me. And it's an exchange of community, mm-hmm. or it's an experience of community with an exchange, hopefully, of grace and love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that has so influenced what we do at the Swingers and on my other gigs too.
Yeah. No, that's really powerful, using something as an avenue to spread, kindness and grace and love, like you said. I think that's really important, whatever it is for someone, right? To have an outlet that doesn't necessarily have to be consuming you to the point where you're, every night and day you're thinking about music, like in this case, or finding ways to connect your passions to, other important parts of your life, in this case, spirituality. And I think that's really important. And I hope people kind of take that from this conversation too.
Yeah. When I think of Bob Marley's music or Duke Ellington's music, mm-hmm. Stevie Wonder's music, Bob Wills' music, mm-hmm. I get that. I feel that now. Yeah. Is that just all coming from me? I don't think so. But who knows what was on Bob Marley's mind?
Mm-hmm.
Et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's powerful feeling like passion through music when you can, like, when you're. And I kind of wanted to transition to this anyway, but like live music, especially, like you can feel it when, somebody is, playing their heart out or singing their heart, like you can tell. And that's with a lot of things too, like passion and authenticity really shines in what you're doing. And obviously the pandemic has shifted the music industry, especially in Nashville, right? Because a lot of, musicians rely on that in-person stuff. And now that it's starting to get back going, which is really promising, what can you say about how it's like changed, your life over the year, and how has like the live streaming, through Robert's helped and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been thinking about that the last week or so, that I often am frustrated that I'm not famous like Duke Ellington was, or accomplished like some of my friends. But, I have always been a kind of person, like meat and potatoes, basics type person. And honestly, I don't really love riding in a bus, and I don't love flying in a plane. I love playing and singing. Mm-hmm. So my professional choices have been really about doing more of the stuff I like and less of that other stuff. but I do get jealous of my friends sometimes who are, I have a friend from our Indiana band who she's been touring with Billy Joel for 30 years, and
Wow.
he's famous rock star, and another friend from the same band who's been the Saturday Night Live drummer for 25 years, and this big session king in New York. One other, that band has a lot of people who went on to do big name stuff. And sometimes I get a little jealous, but you know what? This past year, who's had the most gigs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And thank God, mostly for Robert's Western World, who was so supportive when things totally shut down. They said, hey, we're going to keep doing some live streams. And you can put them on our Facebook page, which had 25,000 followers or something. And that really kept me afloat, man, for several months.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they were able to open, they've been very kind about booking me and the Swingers too. So it's awesome. And sometimes, you never know, like in any 12-step group, the first step is about admitting your powerlessness. Admitted I was powerless over alcohol, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't know what's best for you. In fact, in my experience, most of the time, I haven't known what's best for me.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes great things happen. And if you could just, it's not really even about me. I can't say I'm in control of it even that far. But sometimes just avenues open up for you and you go, yes. And you take that turn.
Green lights,
and it works out for the best. Yeah. In ways you don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. I just started listening to Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights, and that's the whole thing, right? You never know what's gonna open up for you, and you don't know how that's gonna impact your life down the road either. Does it make you more grateful now to play in front of people? Like you said, gratuity and things of gratefulness a lot throughout this conversation. Like, have you got a new appreciation for interacting with fans personally as opposed to over Facebook comments on a live stream?
Yeah, playing music with people, it's a two-way communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had the experience of playing for 70,000 people in a football stadium. But my experience is a little closer.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't compare. I don't know what that other thing is like. I won't even say I do, but it's very important to me to have that back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was able to turn on a couple of your streams for my parents in the summer, and then send some comments your way. And I know they just listen to you all night or however long you were streaming. And so I think it is really important to maintain that. But you're right. That's one thing I kind of took for granted before is live music and how much you kind of miss that. Like I'm excited to get back into it. And once, I travel back down to Nashville with my dad here soon or whenever that is, whenever I have time really, it'll be a whole new appreciation. And I think it goes both ways, like you said.
Yeah. And for me, I've only been able to, show up to one or two live concerts, like in my time here. Like I have never really gone into that sort of, that activity. I didn't really think live music was for me. But the time that I went, it's probably been the most memorable music experience of my life. And like, I think about it more than I do when I'm just listening to the songs, pre-recorded live stream, like all that sort of stuff, just because the presence that you feel from not only the music, but the people on stage performing the music, as well as the people in the audience listening too. Like it's one of the prime examples of like a community sense, like just a big sense of community with something that, they all have in common. They're here to listen to this, particular group or this person sing. Like you feel like you're all together on something that, it's just what the power of music does for people. And I think it's insanely special. So it's really nice to hear, your take on it, as well as, Ben's experience from going to Nashville, because it's something that I've never really been able to fully experience in the truest sense, being able to go to the same place over and over again, or being able to go to multiple concerts, hearing multiple different people. But I won't ever forget that. I know that for my life is the time that I went. So
yeah,
fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
And I also will say too, I've been to Summerfest a handful of times, right? And I was younger, and it's a totally different thing than sitting in a bar, in Nashville and just like listening to music. It's a lot more intimate. But there again, like we said before, it's all about what types of music you like, and that doesn't mean you don't have respect for other types either, right? Like you got to appreciate the talent and the time that it takes to produce a song and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
I have a lot of friends who are what do you call it? Not prudes, but a little bit snobbish. Mm-hmm. People are like that sometimes. What I'm into, it's this stuff, man, and that other stuff is nowheresville.
Yeah.
But I think, for instance, like some of these friends of mine who are just they have blinders on. Old country is the only country. Mm-hmm. When I listen to top 40 country today, of course, stylistically it's different, and some of the stuff stylistically I like better, some I don't like as well. But I still think out of every 10 songs, there's 3 that are awesome. There's 3 that are terrible, and there's 4 that they're okay. They'll do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think it was the same way back in Hank Williams' time. But we don't ever listen to the crappy songs from 1940.
Exactly.
That's a great point. That is a great
really
point. Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing about different styles of music, right? Mm-hmm. I bet out of every 10 rap hits, there's 3 brilliant ones, 3 terrible. That's just humans we're all doing our best. And sometimes it's awesome and sometimes it's not so great,
Well, yeah, it's all about how it gets received too. Like if it's your work, obviously you're really going to be passionate about it. But like let's say if an album doesn't like make a splash until like a couple of years after, maybe the public wasn't ready for it. Like they weren't, that wasn't the direction of music, and collectively music takes a different direction. Like you said, in country, like Austin and I are really getting into like back into Chris Stapleton and, Colter Wall and things like that. That type of country. And again, like it wasn't until, a few years ago that kind of started to take hold again. So it's interesting, like you said, to see like certain trends in music and what's released today, and you can pick certain parts of it, and everything is inspired by everything before it. Right. Like without the old country music, you don't have the newer stuff, and like, stuff like that. But once again, music is a powerful and interesting thing that has its own history, so. Well, we also
hopefully a future.
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure. Yeah,
exactly. Well, John and I also have something in common. We both are not able to acquire the coveted Wisconsin cheese. I'm in Oklahoma now, and every time my parents, send meat or a package or whatever, I ask like, hey, can you throw in some string cheese for us? So I'm excited when they come down for Easter to get that too. But Austin, you're lucky. Take advantage.
I know. I got to take advantage of it more. Take it for granted is what I'm doing. I haven't been able to indulge in the finer Wisconsin cheeses, but I'll miss it when I leave. That's for sure.
It's funny because I'll go to the grocery store and it's like real Wisconsin cheese or something, and then I'll have it and it's like it's nothing compared to like our local cheese store or like the cheese curds there, and it's funny. But I know my dad's brought like bags of the last time we came to Nashville, we brought like bags of cheese curds and string cheese, like for the people at Roberts. It's kind of funny, but
yes, I for health reasons, I told him to cool it, man, with the cheese. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's funny.
But you could take him Oklahoma wheat or corn or
exactly.
Yeah.
No, we want to thank you again. Like this has been a great conversation and multifaceted for sure. There's a lot of good elements to it. I had to ask, like you went to school at Indiana. Are you excited for March Madness starting up here?
Well, you haven't looked very carefully at the seeds because there's no Hoosiers on the bracket. Okay.
I know, but I mean, it's still exciting, right, to have it back and everything.
Yes.
But
yeah, it's a great event, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
For somebody who doesn't really care too much about college basketball, like I do, but this is the time of year where I feel like I'm involved in every team's sort of, on court, off court kind of situations going on. And so it's kind of fun how this can change, somebody's opinion about a sporting event, or as well as anything really. Like music taste, you could say something about that with stuff going on, but it's just like, it's a great time to be a, somewhat sports fan, I guess. That's what I'm a somewhat sports fan.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people are not going to be getting work done these couple weekends.
Exactly my point. Yeah.
Which is really bad because I have a lot to do for Monday.
Yeah.
But no, thanks again. If you go to Nashville, you can find him in Roberts on Monday nights, right? Otherwise, we'll link his Instagram and website and things when this episode drops on Monday. But once again, thanks, John. It was a really great conversation, and happy to see you live again soon.
Thank you. You've all made me feel valued and appreciated. I hope I can pay it forward or pay it back.
Yeah, love to hear that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, we'll see you next week.